In last week's homily, I spoke about the importance of how we as Christians deal with conflict. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus outlines how we should go about seeking to resolve conflict amongst each other. In many respects, outlining a process is much easier than having the task to preach on the expected outcome of said process. As fate would have it, I get to preach again this week, and I have the task of briefly talking about what the outcome of resolved conflict should look like. In our gospel today, Jesus paints a picture for us as to what the outcome of settling conflict should look like, and that is forgiveness. I wonder how many of us would be willing to say that forgiveness is an easy act to accomplish. This is a hard one for us, because when we feel as if we have been wronged, there's a lot more emotion tied to the situation, especially when it involves loved ones. We are often more than just angry. We are also usually hurt. And when those feelings of anger and hurt are mixed, they often turn into grudges that last and linger. I know that speaking from personal experience, we oftentimes say and do the most hurtful things to the ones we love the most. In the heat of an argument, we say things we don't necessarily mean, and our comments and responses become exaggerated to the point that what we are saying deeply hurts the individual they are directed towards. But that's the point, right? We want to inflict a greater sense of hurt and anger that caused us to lash out in the first place. This feeling for me is sickening, and I confess that I have been guilty of it. But what I have learned is that by trying to win the argument, the pain I inflict on loved ones is pain I also inflict on myself. And when I see myself walking down that awful and dreaded path, I try to stop, swallow my pride, and ask for forgiveness. It's not easy admitting you are wrong when you feel like you have been wronged. But in doing so, my hope is that the relationship can be restored. And the point of conflict can ultimately be dealt with and resolved in the end. Emotion is raw when it comes to conflict, and we as a faith community need to be nurtured and built up rather than weakened and torn down. In our gospel lesson this morning, Jesus speaks to the necessity of forgiveness because he knows the effects unforgiveness has on both individuals and the community. There are so many situations within our world, within our society, in our workplaces, in our church, and even in our families, as I mentioned, that when not dealt with can sow seeds of bitterness and fester into deep and painful wounds. Often we don't really want to forgive someone or even ask for forgiveness, even though we know we should. There are so many reasons we invent within our minds to not forgive. Perhaps there are feelings and desires of revenge. Perhaps we want the person who has hurt us to pay for what we have experienced. Or perhaps it's purely pride that gets in the way. Again, I admit the business of forgiveness is not an easy one. Forgiveness is not a matter of putting the other person on probation, just waiting for them to do something wrong again so that we can take it back. And forgiveness is certainly not an excuse for unjust behavior. At the heart of the action, forgiveness means to release, though it certainly doesn't mean to forget. Some events and situations we should never forget. Things such as slavery, the Holocaust, exploitation of women and children, the infidelity of a spouse, a lie that turned your life upside down, abuse, betrayal. The list goes on. Forgiveness, without a doubt, is a hard and radical choice where we make the choice to leave behind our resentment and desire for retaliation, however fair such punishment may seem to be. Note, the wrongful behavior remains condemned, but the offender is released from its effects as far as the forgiver is concerned. By doing this, by doing what seems to be so impossible, we release ourselves from the power of bondage the original wound held over us. I would be naive and unrealistic if I told you that all the feelings of anger and hurt just disappeared when we seek and give forgiveness. They don't. But we can experience the richness of God's grace and mercy by seeking to be made whole again through the ministry of healing. If healing is something you are interested in, talk to me. Talk to one of the other clergy, as we have a vital healing ministry here at Christ Church through the Order of St. Luke. As we go into this week, I encourage you to think about someone you need to forgive and someone who you need to ask forgiveness from. I can tell you there is nothing more powerful than to look somebody in their eyes, admit your wrongdoing, and to ask for forgiveness. And equally so, there is nothing more powerful than to be able to forgive somebody when they come to you and admit their wrongdoings. More times than not, it may first feel like eating a big old slice of humble pie. But that healing that begins at that moment of forgiveness is life-giving. May we live into those words which many of us learned as a child, in which we say time and time again, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us."